Hi, my name is Jim Smith. I'm an assistant chaplain at the Harris County Jail in Houston, Texas. I've been teaching a series of lessons down at the jail dealing with foundations for Christian doctrine. This particular one is the 8th video that I've prepared, and it's the second one on anthropology. Last time we talked about young earth creation, and we read Genesis chapter 1 as you would if you were a young earth creationist. I told you that there were 5 hypotheses, that being one of them, and that I would list or go through each of those 5 hypotheses rather than me just teaching the one I believe. I would let you decide which one you believed, and these particular 5 are probably the most popular ones. So last time I got through one of them, and right at the end I gave you some reasons I had a little apprehension about it, or not so sure about that one. Each one of those 5, I'm going to tell you there's some problems I have with this particular one. So each one has its problems, if you will. And I said the problems I have with young earth creation, which says that the earth is 6,000 years old, is radioisotope dating and radiocarbon dating, and then all those fossils. Radioisotope dating is a scientific method for determining the age of certain materials, and they would tell you that the Earth is 3.4 billion years old rather than 6,000 years old. Quite a discrepancy. Forgive me if I get into a little bit of chemistry. Again, I was a chemist in my training, a chemist with Shell my whole career, and so I get into this a little bit. I want you to be familiar enough with radioisotope dating that you can have a discussion with someone who might disagree with you on your hypothesis about creation. So again, just to do a little review of chemistry, we have over 100 elements that we know about. Each one has a nucleus. Each atom has a nucleus and some electrons going around that nucleus. The simplest one is hydrogen, which has a proton in the nucleus. Protons are positively charged particles. Helium, which is the second one, has 2 protons in it and 2 neutrons. Neutron would be a similar particle, except it's neutral in charge. I guess that's how they get the word neutron, from the neutral charge. If you go a little further down the periodic table, you come to carbon, which has 6 protons, and the most stable form also has 6 neutrons. So we would say the atomic number is 6, the number of protons, and the atomic weight is 12. 6 protons plus 6 neutrons equals 12. Each element is identified by the number of protons in it. So if you have 1, then it's hydrogen. If you have 6, it's carbon. If you have 7 protons, it's nitrogen. Nitrogen in its stable form has 7 neutrons in it also, so its atomic weight is 14. Now, with that little explanation, let me just say that there are some isotopes. An isotope is the same element, so carbon has 6 protons in it, but if you had 8 neutrons in that nucleus rather than 6, you would have a total of 14. 6 plus 8 would be 14. It would be called carbon-14. The more stable form is carbon-12, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. Um, our out in space, there are cosmic rays. These rays are very powerful. Think of them kind of like an X-ray. They bombard various elements and kick off free neutrons. Those neutrons are very reactive. When they get to our atmosphere, now remember our atmosphere is the air, so it's 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. It's about 60 miles thick before we get out into space where there is no air. As those free neutrons come into our atmosphere, they're going to hit, most likely, a nitrogen. The nitrogen, when it does that, it kicks off a proton and adds that neutron to the nitrogen molecule. But now, since it only has 6 protons, it's carbon. And this is the formula. I'll show you the formula here. The N0 is a neutron, hits a nitrogen molecule. The stable form is nitrogen 14. And since a proton is kicked off, now we've got carbon with 6 protons, but now we have 8 neutrons. So we have formed carbon 14. Okay, that would be the formula. That carbon 14 is very reactive, and it reacts with oxygen in the air. And now we have carbon dioxide. It's a carbon 14 carbon molecule, but it has carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide filters in toward the air, goes down toward the earth. Remember, now we've got a lot of carbon dioxide with carbon 12, and now we've got some carbon dioxide with carbon 14. Scientists have been able to determine the rate at which those neutrons hit nitrogen and form this carbon 14. So they know about the mixture, what the mixture should be based on that rate. Plants on Earth love to gobble up carbon dioxide, and through a process called photosynthesis, they remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They form starches and sugars. The body of a plant is a starch and sugar, and that starch and sugar has some carbon 14 in it. Mostly carbon 12, but it has some carbon 14 in it. Along comes an animal to eat the plants. Along comes a bear or a human to eat the animal. And each time they're ingesting carbon 14. So my flesh has part carbon 14 in it. All living things have both carbon 12 and carbon 14. That's fine as long as it's living and continually taking in some carbon 14. But when it dies, it's no longer able to take in anything. And so that's kind of fixed, that carbon 14, carbon 12 ratio, when that plant or animal dies. Now, the interesting thing is that isotope is unstable. So it decays. And here's a formula. So that carbon 14 decays back to the original nitrogen and gives off an electron. Scientists have been able to calculate the rate of decay. And again, I'm talking about radioisotope, but I'm using carbon 14 for my example here. Whatever has died, the carbon 14 will decay, and it slowly goes down. Scientists have determined the rate of decay. It's slow, and they measure it in something called a half-life. For carbon 14, the half-life is 5,800 years. So if you start out with a handful of carbon-14, in 5,800 years, you'll have half a handful. It decays at that rate. You can use that as a clock, measuring the carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratio, and of course, it will get slower and be less and less of carbon-14 as time goes by. You could, I have a cotton shirt on. You could conceivably measure the carbon-14 carbon-12 ratio. This was originally a plant, and you can determine how old it is. Well, I'm sure it's not that old, so you probably wouldn't really notice it. But if we talk about, say, a pyramid in Egypt where the king was buried 3,000 years ago or something, and his body's been wrapped in cloth, or he has material in his tomb that's been undisturbed, then you could probably determine by carbon-14 carbon-12 ratio how old that material is, and therefore how old that king was, or how long he's been buried. You could measure, you've heard of the Shroud of Turin, supposedly the sheet that was laid over Jesus. You could measure carbon-14-12 ratio and determine the age of that Shroud of Turin. If there's a mammoth that died up in the Arctic and was frozen in a glacier, you had some of the flesh from that mammoth, you could determine the age of that mammoth when it died, or rather how long ago that it died. So it's helpful in determining the age of anything that used to be living. Now, a couple problems with this. That's where I really want to point out. It sounds good, and it's pretty effective, I think, for a few thousand years. But there are some problems. And one of those, this method really was only developed like 1960. It's not that old. Again, I said scientists have determined the rate of carbon-14 formation out in the atmosphere. Well, they've only been doing that for a few years. They assume that the rate is the same 2,000 years ago, but they really don't know. There's a lot of assumptions in that. In addition, there are other things that can affect that ratio. We burn gasoline, a lot of it. We burn coal. We burn a lot of coal. Those materials are supposedly hundreds of millions of years, where the plants that grew at that time fell into the mud and got under pressure and temperature. Crude oil and coal have formed. They should have no carbon-14 in them, because by about 50,000 years, all the carbon-14 is gone. It's decayed. So if you burn that, you're putting a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which should have no carbon-14, and that would dilute what's in the air and might skew the answer. Also, we have a lot of nuclear testing going on that would produce a lot of carbon-14 and could skew what's in the atmosphere to cause us to get inaccurate numbers. Let me look at my notes here right quick. Now, the interesting thing, the real clinker for me for carbon-14 is if you actually check the carbon-14 level in crude oil and coal and diamond. Diamond is pure carbon. Lo and behold, there's some carbon-14 in it. And if those things are really hundreds of millions of years old, there shouldn't be any. And so what's the explanation for that? That would kind of say that maybe this young Earth creation is accurate. So again, there's some problems, I think, with this in certain areas that I can't explain. Maybe someone else could, and I wonder if that explanation is good. Now, the interesting thing is that's things that have been living. There are many other radioisotope clocks. For instance, potassium going to argon, or thorium going to lead. Those half-lives are millions of years, and so that becomes a clock for minerals and rocks and dirt, and can be used to determine the age of the Earth, or supposedly. Again, some problems with those, huh? If you've ever heard of Mount St. Helens, which erupted, say, in the 1980s in Washington State, it put out a lot of lava, a lot of dirt that covered North America. About 10 years after that volcano erupted or exploded, they took a sample of the lava. It was about 10 years old, and they submitted it for radioisotope dating. And the answer came out about 340,000 years old. They knew it was only 10 years old. So you say, whoa, where did that come from? In fact, I have read about people who've taken a sample and sent it off to different labs and got as much as 1 billion years age difference. Again, that just makes me wonder if radioisotope dating really is as accurate as we think it is. So again, those are some questions about radioisotope dating that may tell you young Earth creation may be more valid than perhaps we think. Now, I told you I was going to cover 5 different hypotheses. That was the first one, young Earth creation. The second one I want to talk about is atheistic evolution. That's what we're taught in school. That's what the majority of people would believe, evolution. Again, when we talked about apologetics, we use some data to suggest there is a God. And this is people are assuming there is no God when they adopt this particular hypothesis about creation. This comes predominantly from Charles Darwin's book, written about 150 years ago, The Origin of Species, when he proposed evolution as a method, as a means of creation. It says that over infinite time, matter becomes more organized, everything lines up just right, and it happens. So out of all this chaos and given enough time, anything can happen, including going from inanimate materials to living cells. It says that things go from less ordered to more ordered. So always things get more and more complicated. We started with single cell animals, they become multiple cell animals until we have human beings. So everything gets more and more ordered. It says that there is a gradual change over hundreds of millions of years. Things change and go from one thing to another. So we have the fish, and the fish becomes a reptile, and the reptile becomes a bird, and so forth. That over a period of time, those things happen. It says that life was created by electricity and some different chemicals. So the theory here is that we had some methane gas, we had some ammonia gas, we had some oxygen, we had some water, and it got hit by electric spark, by lightning, and it formed a protein molecule. And that protein molecule got together with other protein molecules to make a multiple protein molecule, a bigger molecule. And at some point, that protein molecule turned into a living cell. And of course, we know the process after that. So that would be how life came into being from inanimate material. It says that new species come into being by gene mutation. We have DNA. It's kind of a code for what we're to look like. My DNA says I have blue eyes. It determines my height, the color of my skin, also color of my hair, all those kinds of things. And the way we get a new species is when somehow that gene, that DNA gets changed. It mutates. So maybe it gets exposed to a cosmic ray or ultraviolet light, and it causes the DNA molecule to change a little bit, so that now when I'm born, I'm a little different than I was supposed to be. And as time goes by, again, the ape turns into a human or something like that because of gene mutation. Atheistic evolution says that man evolved from apes. The fossil record shows the evolution over millions of years, and the laws of the universe have always existed. So those are some precepts that are proposed for atheistic evolution. Now, a third hypothesis. Third hypothesis kind of it takes into account many people, while they believe in evolution, they also believe in God. And so there's something called theistic evolution. And I've looked on the internet and read the definition of that. And basically there's a God. He got it started. You might hear talk about the Big Bang Theory. He suddenly put things into being, but evolution took over after that, and the process of planets being formed, stars being formed, and people eventually showing up is evolution. So again, it's evolutionist. It's an evolution theory or hypothesis, but it just inserts God into the beginning. Now, let me talk a bit about problems with evolution. I said I'd give you some problems I have, and I have a lot of problems with evolution. If you haven't figured it out by now, I really don't believe in evolution. So I'll say that up front. Some of these other things are scripturally correct, or at least conceivably correct, but I don't find evolution to be scripturally correct. And the first one I wrote down is the anthropic principle. We talked about this when we talked about apologetics. The anthropic principle talks about intelligent design, that we can just look at the universe and all the intricacies and the complications of the universe and how it's exactly the right way and how to get that way. Again, most all scientists would, even atheist scientists, will accept that there must have been a creator designer to get it this fine-tuned. And again, an illustration of the anthropic principle that I use is think about the Mount Rushmore, 4 presidents' faces carved into the side of a mountain. If you look at it strictly from an evolutionist, and there is no creator designer, you would say, wow, isn't that interesting that the wind and the rain carved those 4 presidents' faces into the side of that mountain? If you or I, we look at it and we say, well, wait a minute. I can see that somebody did that. Somebody planned it. Somebody did the whole carving and so forth. It wasn't just that the wind and the rain happened to do that. So that would be a big argument that evolution isn't correct, because uh, we can see design, some intelligent being putting this all together. Also, probability. Now we have big computers, Cray computers, or probably even bigger than that now, that can make calculations that we couldn't many years ago. And again, they have come up with the probability, well, I won't say probability, how many years it would take, based on probability, for an inanimate material to turn into a living cell. How many years, based on probability, would it take to make a living cell out of gases and minerals and so forth, inanimate materials? And the answer that they came up with, it would take 10 to the 120,000 years. To give you some perspective, 10 to the second power is 100 years, 10 to the third power is 1,000 years, 10 to the sixth power is 1,000,000 years, 10 to the ninth power is 1,000,000,000 years, 10 to the 12th power is 1,000,000,000,000 years, and they only believe the Earth is 3.4 billion years old, so we're already at 10 to the 12th power out to 1,000,000,000,000 years. Imagine how many years it is at 10 to the 120,000th power. So probability of getting a live cell is, well, basically it won't happen. So that's another argument against evolution. Also, again, the feeling is that gradually various animals evolved into another animal by gene mutation. And it takes, hundreds of millions of years to do that. So it seems to me that most of the time, something is going to be in an intermediate stage. It's going to be somewhere between a fish and an amphibian. It's not going to be either a fish or amphibian. But the startling thing is we don't find intermediate fossils. And really, you would think that almost all of them would be intermediate, and yet we don't find them. Now, I know there's some argument by paleontologists and so forth that, oh yeah, this is or that isn't, but I kind of think that's wishful thinking. From my own personal experience, by the way, I grew up on a farm. We raised dairy cattle. As a kid, we knew a cow was about to have a calf. My job, if that cow didn't show up for milking that morning, my job was to go find her, and that usually meant she was having a calf somewhere. And I learned early on that I might find a cow with a leg sticking out or something like that. We saw calves born with the skin inside out, the hair on the inside and the flesh on the outside. We saw calves with their legs growing out backwards. Those are mutations, and it never ended well. Usually they were born dead, or they only lived a short period of time. Mutations, in my mind, don't produce better animals. They produce worse animals that die. So I don't have much faith in this gene mutation producing better animals. Let's talk a little bit about the second law of thermodynamics. In a nutshell, second law of thermodynamics says things decay to their most stable form. I can look at myself. I'm an old guy. I used to be able to run fast and jump high and not have any aches and pains, but my body is decaying. And someday it'll turn back to dust. It will go to the most stable form. It's just a law of nature, second law of the thermodynamics, that things decay. If I take a bright, shiny new nail and put it outside in the wind and the rain and go out a few months later, I'll have a pile of rust, iron oxide. It went to the more stable form. And so the second law of thermodynamics says that things, they become simpler. They don't become more complicated. So evolution is just the opposite of the second law of thermodynamics. We've never found anything that would prove that law is inaccurate. So I think it violates the second law of thermodynamics. The final thing I will mention is irreducible complexity. Let me just show you a book right a second. This is a book, again, you guys who are down at the jail might recognize this. Darwinism Under the Microscope by James Gills. See if I can get this where it doesn't have a glare. Dr. Gills is an ophthalmologist, so he's an eye expert, and he talks about the eye, and he says, for the eye is very complicated. It has a retina, it has a cornea, it has nerves, it has muscles and eyeball, all sorts of things, all sorts of components. And he said, evolution says when something evolves, if it isn't useful, it falls off. It drops off or disappears. He says if you just develop a nerve or a cornea or something of the eye, you don't have all the other components, it'll just disappear. It'll never go any further. So you have to have all of these parts evolve at the same time. And the likelihood of that is very slim, that you'd have that much mutation. So again, that's the law of irreducible complexity. You don't just have one little thing change and stay healthy. You got to have a bunch of them change for any useful thing to happen. And again, I'm not explaining that very well, but he has several articles in that book that talk about evolution and some of the errors in evolution. So those are problems I have with atheistic or theistic evolution. I don't believe those are the processes. I want to mention one final hypothesis. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth one. This one is a theological explanation. It's called Old Earth creation. And it's a way of kind of combining theology with the radioisotope dating and the fossils to come up with an answer that fits both things. If you look on the internet, you will see a guy by the name of Hugh Ross. He is a big proponent of Old Earth creation. He says the universe is about 15 billion years old, which is what science says based on radioisotope decay and the redshift in the stars. He says that our solar system is about 4.5 billion years old, which is, again, what science says. He says that creation days are really ages. So when we read Genesis chapter 1, remember we said It was evening and morning the first day, and evening, morning the second day, and so forth. And we said, as the young earth creationists would say, that's a 24-hour day. Now, the Hebrew word for that is yom, Y-O-M. Let me read a couple of verses for you. Psalm 90, verse 4. I don't have my phone, so I'm going to look it up in my Bible. Psalm 90. It's a familiar verse. You can read it also in Peter. It says essentially the same thing. Psalm 90, verse 4 says, for 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it passes by, or as a watch in the night. Watch in the night is 3 hours. So 1,000 years is like a day or a watch in the night to God. In other words, God's not really limited by chronology. And so God can, it might be 1,000 years and he might say it's a day. That's the implication of that verse. The word yom can be interpreted either as a 24-hour day or as a longer period of time. And I'll give you an example. I'm old enough now. I can say, well, back in my day, we used to do so-and-so. Back in my day is not a 24-hour day. It means a period of time back in my history. So it's many days or maybe many years. And so it can be interpreted as a long period of time. In the good old days, is another expression. It means a period of time, not one day, not one 24-hour day. So Hugh Ross would say, well, this is how he would interpret that day in Genesis. And I'll read also Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. Now, when we did the young earth creation, we stopped at Genesis 2, verse 3. Let me read verse 4 for you. Verse 4 says, this is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. That says he did it all in one day, not 6 days. So again, that yom may be interpreted a period of time, like 6 days, or in Hugh Ross' view, billions of years. So again, Genesis 2:4 says that it's a long period of time. We are in day 7 now. Day 7 is not 24-hour days. We've been in it quite a while. Even for the young earth creationists, we've been in it 6,000 years. So again, seventh day isn't a 24-hour day. Let me see what else. Other proponents of Hugh Ross are that created plants and animals were created after their kind, so it agrees with young earth creation that they didn't evolve from a fish to an amphibian or a reptile. They stayed a fish, or stayed an amphibian, or stayed a tiger. They didn't evolve. So he rules out evolution. He feels that God created modern man about 30,000 years ago. So there may be a Cro-Magnon man, there may be a Neanderthal man, but modern man like you and I, we were created about 30,000 years ago. He also believes that when species or genus dies out, it becomes extinct, that God creates another one. So, 100 million years, dinosaurs die, and so God created other kinds of animals. So that's how the fossils were formed. You see the extinction of something, God creates another one, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a bunch of fossils or something else. So you don't have to have intermediate fossils. And God was in the process of creating until day 7, and now he doesn't create anymore. The fossil record reflects that age and dying out of various species. So that's, I'm going fast, but that's old Earth creation. Now, 2 or 3 problems I see with old Earth creation. One is those species die out and become extinct, and new ones are formed. So death had to be going on long before Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's when it looks like in my Bible, when death came into existence. Before that, it was paradise. Adam and Eve were going to live forever. And I would assume animals also were going to live forever. So that creates a problem for me. It introduces death before Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Another one, if all of these things are going on for hundreds of millions of years, plants growing and so forth, it would have had to have sunlight. And we would conceive that that sunlight would be coming from the sun. And yet, in Genesis chapter 1, we don't see stars and sun and so forth being formed until the 4th day, or the 4th age, if you're old Earth creationist. So how do I reconcile that in my head, that those stars and the sun weren't formed until the 4th day? Where did those plants, where did they get the light all that time, all those hundreds of millions of years? And the third one, which really isn't a big one, but again, we do the genealogy. Adam was the first man, modern man, and the genealogy says that was 6,000 years ago, not 30,000. And yeah, I know there's some, maybe some skipping of genealogies, but again, they've said, well, about the most it can be is 10,000 from genealogy. Doesn't agree with the 30,000. So I have one more hypothesis, which I will speak about next time, and we'll also talk about how did man get here and some of the aspects of man. We'll finish that lesson next time. So I want to thank you for listening.